Our theme for Christmas this year was a new world being born. And on Hope Sunday, we prayed that even the darkest moments we experience might be, in the words of the Sikh activist Valerie Kaur, the darkness of the womb and not the darkness of the tomb. On Peace Sunday, we encouraged each other not to wait for prophets to guide us into a better world, but to become prophets ourselves. And on Joy Sunday, any theological message was completely overwhelmed by the wonderful music from Chris and Lisa and our entire choir. But I do hope that there was a reminder in there somewhere that joy does not wait for everything to be amazing. Joy comes upon us and leads us into more beautiful worlds. And then last week, we saw on Christmas Eve in Jesus Christ the birth of all newness and growth and change. We saw God in the midst of the mess, creating pockets of beauty all around us. And now, today, the season of waiting, Advent, is over. We are now officially in the season of Christmas. To be specific, today is the 7th day of Christmas. If your true love is of the traditional sort when it comes to presents, you are knee-deep in birds at this point, and you have my deepest condolences. It is also, today, New Year's Eve. Someone actually had to remind me of this when I texted them and asked them out to dinner, and they said that tonight might not be the best night for a low-key dinner with their pastor. Shows how fun I am. I had completely forgotten that this was a holiday. Okay. Raise your hand if you'll be in bed by 9. There we go. I love you people. All right. We stand here on New Year's Eve on the brink of a new year, pondering what tomorrow might bring. Pondering whether we should bother making a New Year's resolution or whether we'll just give it up by February, whether it won't work anyway. We are in an in-between place, in a liminal place. Because let's face it, it feels like 2023 is basically already over. But 2024 has not technically yet begun. One age has passed, another has yet to start. We are in between. And this is where our scriptures find us today as well. Our passage for Isaiah gives voice to the hope of the people of ancient Israel. It was written in another in-between time, after the return to Babylon, but before all of the temples had been rebuilt. And it speaks of the hope that one day God would take God's people and not only restore them, but have them living in such right relationship that all the world would see and say, yes, I want to be like that. And then when we turn to Luke, we find Simeon waiting in the temple along with Anna, the prophet. Simeon, it is said, had waited years for the consolation of Israel. He had been told he would not die until he saw his nation liberated from foreign control, until he saw the work and wealth of his community benefit his own community, until he saw God once again present among his people. If he had a fault, it was that he loved his people too much and perhaps his enemies too little. And Luke says there was a prophet in the temple, and her name was Anna. And please note, he doesn't say a lesser prophet. He doesn't say a second-class prophet. He doesn't say a prophet only for women and children. Simply a prophet. Funny how some people do not mention her a lot, huh? Anna was getting up there. She had lived for decades as a widow after the death of her husband, and each day she spent in the temple praying and fasting. Anna walks in the footsteps of Miriam, Deborah, Huldah, and Isa, in the footsteps of the great women prophets of the First Testament. She paves the way for the daughters who will prophesy, as the prophet Joel dreamed, for the women who led in Jerusalem, in Corinth, in the earliest Christian churches, for every woman who has stood up for dignity, for freedom, for fairness. And Anna and Simeon have waited for years for the chance to see a new world. And then, despite their promises, despite knowing that the Holy Spirit had spoken to them, they had to have wondered if they were really ever going to see it. And then along comes two young parents. Like always, carrying a little infant, there for a ritual dedication and purification, like any good Jew of the time period. And if they had spent all those years in the temple, then undoubtedly Simeon and Anna had seen countless parents like this. Some, walked up with their best new robes, leading the finest young lamb. Many more, I suspect, had walked up with children and cousins and whole big families in tow, and yet still mustered up a lamb and a turtle dove, at least as the law suggested. But I also think Simeon and Anna had seen many parents like these, especially under Roman rule, who could not come up with that, could not afford such things. God's law had always made room for the poor. So if you could not afford a lamb, it said you might bring 2 turtle doves instead. So Luke tells us that Simeon and Anna would have seen 2 young parents in simple clothing with a small infant and only 2 turtle doves. And here Mary and Joseph are, carrying the Son of God, carrying the miracle child, and Luke says only 2 turtle doves as a gift. With these 2 words, Luke tells us Jesus was poor. He grew up poor. His love for the poor was for his community, his family, his own position in life. And side note, if you're wondering why you get 2 turtle doves on the second day of Christmas in that song, this is why. I wonder if Simeon and Anna were kind of like us, and never expected to see God revealed in this way. Sort of had this basic instinct to look for God among positions of wealth and power in the families bringing lambs in the finest robe. I wonder if they looked at this couple and then looked away before the Holy Spirit whispered, "Hey, look again." And so you have Mary and Joseph bringing the infant Jesus to the temple, 2 turtle doves in hand, and they meet Anna and Simeon. And Anna and Simeon, who were waiting for the consolation of Israel, mind you, they were waiting for freedom. They were waiting for real change to politics, to governance, to the structures of society, to the nature of their economy, to the nature of how they relate to each other, to the entire religious infrastructure. They're waiting for huge change. And they see a baby. And they start to sing. They begin to celebrate. Simeon had not seen liberation yet. He simply saw a vulnerable infant, and yet with his faith in that infant, he saw everything. Sometimes even when we've only seen the tiniest little change, the tiniest little beginning, our faith can tell us that we see the beginning of something huge, something so much more. Because change happens one step at a time. So Simeon sings, and Simeon not only sings, he sings of Jesus as a light to the Gentiles. He says Jesus will be a revelation to the Gentiles, that somehow the ones that Simeon struggled to love would now become part of God's circle of belonging. Simeon had faith enough not only to see grand transformation in a tiny infant, but to let that revelation change everything he thought, to put his trust in God's future, even if it started to look a little different from the one he had expected. He trusted enough to believe that the same God could do things differently than he had imagined. And Anna, too, the prophet, comes to see Jesus, and she offers this infant child her blessing. A female spiritual leader blessing the incarnate God. And she becomes his evangelist, a preacher of the good news, speaking about the child to all who were looking for liberation of Jerusalem. These stories come from an in-between time. We love the Christmas stories of the birth of Jesus, the Magi, the wise men, the shepherds, the star. It's great. and we love, and we spend a lot of time on Jesus' ministry. The teaching, the meals with those considered unworthy, the healing, the love for those who felt themselves undeserving. But this story is from the in-between. Between Jesus' birth and his ministry, between one age and another, between 1 year and another. They did not think at this time that they would single-handedly bring about a better future. They were not running around. They were waiting in the temple. Because they believed that if they trusted in God and in the people around them and kept an eye out for where God was at work, they would see the beginning of something more beautiful. So often our New Year's resolutions are all about changing ourselves, all about becoming somebody who we're not, becoming somebody different, somebody better. As if we're not enough, and we need to become that other person to make the world a better place. But perhaps we can draw from this story a different kind of resolution. For Anna and Simeon did not seek to be anyone else but Anna and Simeon. They just waited for Jesus to come into their lives. Maybe we can look back at 2023 and try to see where the change we're already hoping for has begun to take place. Maybe we can not, for once, demand something completely new that starts tomorrow that we've never done at all in the past. Maybe we can look back with an open gaze and pick one thing that started in 2023 that we want to carry forward. One tiny, vulnerable infant that we will see grow up. Look back and see one moment where we were the best version of ourselves and say, I want to be that person more this year. Not because it's new, but because it's just starting. Look back and see one place where you met the world's great need, where you participated in what God was doing to build God's dream on earth and say, yes, that. I want more of that. Instead of wiping the slate clean, let us think of ourselves as nurturing something that has just started to grow. Nurturing something so that it will bloom in the year to come.